No, that approach is important. Yeah, scroll top. Okay. There's I don't know. Well, not all of them. Some of them. And that first one, I'm pretty sure is working pretty well. Do my best. If they turn out, they turn out. Just scrollthought.com. James? It's always a hate question, isn't it? How long have I considered myself to get hand pad? Probably 3 years. It's a very personal story. Basically, events in my life proved to me that I was not the person that I don't know. But it's interesting.
I think that's
I didn't know we could do all of those ritual forms translate into just I'm not shy about it. It's fine. That's a good one. I like that. So, yeah, all of the religions you see have that foundation, golden.
That's one thing, which is also
yeah, you know, the guy I like a lot, Peter Gray, producer, writer, Scarlet and French. And the recent talk that he gave, he's like, you know, Gerald Darwin, the guy who founded Wicca, and Gallagher, the guy who is looked to as the father of traditionalism, both studied the same library, both got their stuff from the same source, just different things from it. So these are not divergent paths. People who want to separate it are really doing a disservice. Recently, I've been looking into traditional witchcraft, kind of towards a lot of the Golden Dawn, that was the Golden Dawn. Strip out the experience of it, it seems to me. We're tracking something.
What good is the pointer? Oh, that's
Yes, and I love that. I'm an ex-Catholic. And, you know, it's a good man, but it's missing the body. Somewhere that they have.
One about magic, and that's
Yeah, it's hard to get that energy just by watching it. You ever read much about Rantan Wilson? He talks about it. I think he was looking at ways in which being a chaos magician out of the situation. It's like, just go to your temple, go to your experience. The way that you think you got the so hello. So you no one's judging you. That is going to get you closer to the kind of Western. These are my positions for me. For me, that connects with certain feelings. You know, pay attention to what you feel at certain times. It sounds like
cycles. Swaying, dancing, just doing movements.
I'm doing it.
it's hard for me.
It's a lot. Was that? It's not here.
either way.
Yeah, actually, that's actually me too. I don't drop it, but you know, it's drafting. But yeah, I like it. I have several of these. I do. Yeah. They do. They do. Dates have yes, thank you. Yeah, they do. It's the truth. I'm not there's a part Yeah. Well, the thing is the guys that gave her were not necessarily as much. They were versions that they weren't here.
Well, I'm actually going at it because
There's insects.
morning and then we had an incident that she didn't have to run across like eggs or eggs. And then they had to obviously.
Theoretically, I've been pregnant.
So I'm going to say, from purely scientific point of view, it's not non-scientific. Oh, good. These are separate. Yeah. Source of that.
There's a lot of families spots won't show up on the picture. They won't go over on the picture. That's our faces. This is the last that we and it's all silver and after. You know what mom wants to do? You know what I'm saying? Like Curtis, when you get our entire yeah. You wear that kind of there you go.
I didn't say any word for it.
So I mean, it's poetic, but it's a background.
Five of us, we got them.
You know, might as well, workshop out with you,
Okay. All right, I'm sorry, we'll have some more breaks too as things go on, but we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak today who came. So our next guest speaker, she's going to be giving a lecture on Siren, Succubus, and Seductress, The Devil's Bride. She's the author of 11 books. She is the co-director and frequent presenter at Babylon Rising Festival. She's an OTO initiate and proud proprietress of Asteria Books and Events. Please welcome Miss Lorelei Black.
Hello. I'd like to start just by thanking Pneumaticos and Jeremy for putting this event on. It's just a very cool concept and a very cool event, and I am really, really delighted and honored to be able to be a part of it. So I'm Lorelei Black, and lots of us. Hope mentioned that I'm the author of 11 books. Most of those are related to Aphrodite worship. I'm a priestess of Aphrodite, the white goddess, this sort of concept. We're going to be talking a lot about her today. Really, this workshop could have been titled The Dark Side of the White Goddess, just as easily as it was all of this. I just thought this was sexy, so so we went with that. I'm also a traditional witch, not Gardnerian lineage, more Robert Cochrane type lineage, 1734. The witchcraft tradition that my wife and I established several years ago we call American folkloric witchcraft. Because we're not British traditional witches, neither of us have ever even been. We've never been to England, and those archetypes and those paradigms, while they're really a part of the American experience, they're not the entirety of the American magical experience. So, when this conference was announced, I looked at it and said, "Oh, I do that." Which I think was surprising, actually, for a lot of my friends or for a lot of the people who have read some of my works. They think of me as sort of a very right-hand path person. I think they haven't been paying attention. But the thing that I would present, and I think actually Jeremy really touched on this in the introduction that they gave, is that I have both a right hand and a left hand. And when I'm doing magical work, I'm using them both. The concept of embracing not just the light, but the darkness. Jeremy and I, when we were talking on his podcast last week, one of the things that came up is that a lot of light workers say that they only work with the light. Well, what are they shining the light into if not the darkness? You know, and what's going to get exposed except those things that blend into the dark? So I think, really honestly, anybody that's working an actual spiritual magical path, whether it's just spiritual or just magical, if you're really getting into the meat of it, you're probably doing both. Anyway, I'm digressing a little. We're here today to talk about the Devil's Bride. And I feel like we can't have this conversation without talking about the archetypes that are behind this. So I'm going to be talking a lot about the red god, the white goddess, and the black goddess. And here I've got some artwork from a friend and fellow traveler on the Crooked Path, John Brickell, that depicts Lilith, the black goddess, Lilith Sophia, the red god there in the center, Lucifer, Azazel, Cain, and the white goddess, who I'm going to be talking about as Ishtar Eve. Your mileage may vary on who these archetypes show up as, but I'm going to posit that these three are very intimately linked throughout the world of myth and symbol and imagery. And I'm also going to tell you that I am not necessarily, I do a lot of research, but I am not necessarily concerned with historical fact, if we can even prove such things. I'm really interested in mythopoesis. What's true on an archetypal level? What's true, what really resonates with you? Because it can be true fact that we have archaeological evidence to support, and it lies dead as dust on the page. It means nothing. We can have spiritual truths, magical truths, that are the life and blood and breath and bone of the work that we're actually doing, that you're never going to find backed up necessarily in archaeology. So if I start talking about an archetype and you're like, wait, that's not how it is in X, Y, and Z book, well, maybe not. I'm willing to concede that. I'm okay with that. So what we've got here is we've got Lucifer. We've got Azazel. We've got Cain, or Tubal-Cain. And I'm going to be talking more on Sunday about how I really see all three of these names as being the same archetypal being, the bringer of enlightenment to mankind, the bringer of alchemy, the teacher of alchemy, of smithcraft. And we've got the black goddess and the white goddess. And we see these playing out a lot in myth and a lot in legend. I'm going to make the radical suggestion that they're exactly the same goddess. That if he's the witch father, if he's the Lucifer Christ, and I absolutely think that he is, if he's the red god and this green god, this god that's born, teaches the message of love, and then gets cut down in sacrifice, then she is hell. She is Hecate. She is both black and white. However, we like dichotomies. We like to set things in opposition. I think it's a way that the human brain makes sense of our world. We try to bring some order to the chaos. And so we like being able to separate them out and to put one in opposition to the other. So we end up with the Lilith Ishtar at odds. We end up with the Christ Lucifer at odds. It's useful to have dichotomies. It's useful for us to make lists and to get our head around concepts. It's also a pitfall for us because I think that we don't go as deeply into the archetypes, as deeply into the messages that are there, if we focus just on these black and white. However, we're going to focus a bit on the white today. So, but understand that if you go, but wait a second, I really think that what you're saying sounds like Lilith. You are correct. And I am not going to argue that at all. In fact, what I'm going to say is that in my experience, the path of the witch is a gray path. It's neither black nor white. The witch works gray magic. Sometimes black, sometimes white, sometimes neither at all. Indefinable as either black or white. And it's the same for these goddesses. He's the witch father, she's the witch mother. So from the American folkloric witchcraft perspective, what we've got is we've got this darkness and light, and we do separate out a little bit just to be able to dive in and to see how we've got this conflict within ourselves, how we've got, and sometimes not even conflict. Conflict might be the wrong word. We've got this symbiosis within ourselves too, between the black and the white. And what we've noticed, and I actually really love John's artwork here, is that the white goddess is like the light and the darkness. She's not separate. She can't be separate from the darkness. If there was no darkness, how would you recognize light? You know, and the same for the black goddess. She's the darkness within the light. She's that shadow that's cast by the light, and they're critical to each other. One is life and death, and the other is death and life. And there's, I'll let you take that back and chew on it for a little bit, because there's actually a lot of meat just in that statement. So I'm going to touch really briefly on the black goddess concept, just so that, again, we know who we're talking about. The black goddess we identify as Kolio, which is, I believe, an old British name, British-ish name. But it's related etymologically to the Kayak, to Kali. The Proto-Indo-European word kol or kal has to do with covering and hiding, concealing. So the black goddess, really, on a very archetypical level, what she's doing is she conceals wisdom, very deep wisdom, but she's hiding it from you. You have to work to seek it out. She's the weaver of fate, of networks, of information. We often see very black goddess archetypes plying these threads of human life and human knowledge, human information. And she's often depicted as a crone figure or a psychopomp, a death figure. On the other hand, we've got the white goddess, who is illuminating. She is brightness. She is enlightenment. And I'm actually going to be drawing your attention to the words enlightenment and illumination, and also how closely related illumination is to illusion, because she's also the goddess of that. If you look at white goddess myths, there's a lot of sparkle to hide the fact that she might just be ready to sacrifice you. You know, she's the Lady of Enchantment, and we're going to talk a lot about the word enchantment. So illusion, illumination, enchantment, this idea of the voice, of casting a spell with song, these are all things that are very, very white goddessy. She's also the goddess of birth and life and sex and love and passion and desire and all of these things. And I'm so glad that somebody cornered Bill about the lack of separation, really, between love and enlightenment, because they're not different things. And when you get to love at a very high level, I'm not trying to say that the primal urge to procreate is necessarily a deep spiritual thing, but maybe it is. I mean, maybe you've had that. Maybe it is. I'm positive that most of you have had that experience in sexual interaction that could almost be described as rutting. I mean, it's just this very down and dirty experience where you saw God, you know, where you had this aha moment and the entirety of the universe was laid out in front of you. And you had it for about that long. And then you started relaxing and coming back down, and you're back into this place and seeking it again. And I think that that's one of actually the really driving forces behind sexuality. It's not just that we're trying to procreate the species. Well, that's all well and good and necessary. I think that we're also trying to connect with ourselves, with each other, and with the universe in a way that frankly, sex is the easiest way for us to get there. I mean, it's the thing that's the most readily available to all of us to get there. There's a lot of darkness within the white goddess, though. And it's a darkness that I think a lot of people don't necessarily see. She is intimately linked with justice. So a lot of the white goddess figures are the Lady of the Scales. They are, and I'm a Libra, so I'm really into this justice concept. Plays out as retribution and vengeance a whole lot. Because if you fuck up, she's going to get you. She just is. And she's not terribly merciful about it either. If you look at the myths of Aphrodite through Greek myth, Yeah, and not always terribly kind. They often had it coming. I'm just going to say, they had it coming. But she's not necessarily the one who's gonna coddle or ease or make that transition. You're actually much more likely to get that from a black goddess figure who becomes the grandmother, who becomes the, all right, well, you screwed up. Here's a solid smack on the hand and a stern look. Don't do it again. But the white goddess is almost always going to eat your face for it. She's also the goddess of sacrifice. And I think that this is a distinction that's not made very often. But if you look at myth, the lover of the white goddess, the lover of Aphrodite, the lover of Ishtar, the lovers of Celtic white goddess figures, they don't usually have happy endings. Yeah. In fact, it's the blood of her lover that stains the rose. It's the fact that she requires, really, at her hands, death and sacrifice of the bringer of the message of love. It's almost like he has to die. He must. And she's always there. She grieves, she mourns, she doesn't necessarily want him to go, but he has to. And she's there with blood on her hands, which is why the red rose is so often the symbol that's associated with these goddesses of love. Whereas we have the white lily for Lilith. Anyway, I could go down that road. Anyway, red rose, death as payment. And I'm going to say that that's because, and there's a passage that I'm going to read a little bit later, life demands blood sacrifice. Absolutely 100% demands it. You are here because blood was shed on your behalf. The act of sex, that first act of sex, demands a blood sacrifice. Birth demands a blood sacrifice, and ultimately you're going to pay for the gift of life with your death. Cheery, I know. She's also the goddess of persuasion, and you could look at me and go, well, how is persuasion a dark side? How is that a negative thing? Well, in art and in myth, that persuasion, Peitho is the Greek word for persuasion. She's also depicted as a daughter of Aphrodite. Peitho is the one who is most often depicted fleeing the scene of rape. The Greek word for rape doesn't necessarily have to do with a violent physical act the way that we associate it with now. It could have been that at times, but it was also often a girl, an unmarried girl, who was still the property of her father, or a wife who was the property of her husband having sex with somebody who she did not belong to. And Peitho was often there, whispering in their ears, convincing him, convincing her that this was a good idea. And maybe it was. But certainly it's a negative connotation, a negative association that we have with that word even today. Persuasion's also heavily related to this concept of enchantment, to being charmed, to potentially having your will subjugated and made subservient to the will of another. You know, a very, very persuasive person can make you rethink everything. And maybe when you're out of their presence, you don't think the way that you thought when you were with them, but they can, those silver-tongued devils, you know, you can really be charmed out of your will by the white goddess. She's also very, very ragey. Really, really wrathful and ragey. Bill talked a little bit about the association with Venus and the star, and I actually didn't know that in its orbit it makes a rose shape, which I think is cool. We'll talk later. What I did know is that the planet Venus, over the course of 4 years, makes a pentagram in the sky. And this is actually why the Greeks their Olympiads were in 4 years. They marked the passage of time in 4 years, using Venus as that marker. It's why the pentagram was such an important symbol for the Pythagoreans. So when we talk about Aphrodite or about Ishtar, who is associated with the planet Venus as being a starry goddess, we're not just talking about the fact that they call this planet a star, we're talking about the symbol that it actually makes in the sky. If you think about the nature of a star, it's beautiful and twinkling when it's distant, and it is a fiery furnace of nuclear explosions the closer and closer you get to it. And my experience is that you may have this very tender, loving aspect of the white goddess, but she really has a very wrathful, ragey side. And I actually came to understand that better as I got to know myself, because I also have a very wrathful, ragey side. And I thought, why is this so? I mean, I'm supposed to be a priestess of love. Why am I pissed off all the time? It's in my nature. And it's in her nature. It's very much a part of her nature. So those are some of the aspects that we're going to be dealing with today of this sort of dark side of the white goddess. Now, I would say that the white goddess gets kind of overlooked in the occult, and especially parts of the occult community that really think of themselves as occult. She's all the rage, on the right-hand path side of things. She's seen as fluffy. On the left-hand side of things, not just left, but on the darker aspects of things, people are like, oh, the white goddess, you must be a fluffy bunny, And maybe, I mean, I have bunnies; they're vicious, so so maybe I am a fluffy bunny. I think part of this lack of embrace for the white goddess within sort of the more esoteric, hardcore lines of occultism is because the word occult means hidden. And there is really not much that's hidden about the white goddess. She is right out there. She's everywhere. You see her all the time. You think you know her because she's right there in plain sight. It's hard to hide in the light. However, that's often the most effective place to hide something. It's to put it right out in front for everybody to see. Because illusion. Right? If we think we know something, we stop asking questions about it. If we think that we understand something, we don't take the time to look deeper. And I think that that's part of what's happened, at least with her, with the sort of Ishtar, Eve figure. Part of how she hides is that there's this sort of dazzling, this sort of blinding. So you see it, but you don't see it. She's love, which, a lot of us have a real resistance to this sort of, Pneumaticus, what was it you said, the crystal, glitter, and unicorns, right? Because 13-year-old girls, I don't know, like, I have a 14-year-old girl. She's not really into glitter, crystal, and unicorns all that much. But we have this reaction, this adverse reaction to either things that we had wholeheartedly embraced when we were 13, or to things that we found really, really repulsive and sappy and cheesy and superficial. And I agree with that, absolutely. Reject the sappy, cheesy, superficial, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because Hallmark got a hold of love doesn't mean that there's not something substantial there. In fact, we're at a little bit of a disadvantage with the English language because we only have one word for love. The Greeks had at least 3 or 4, at least. And those are the only ones that I can come up with on the top of my head. You have philos, you have eros, you have agape, and just right there we go from this, from concepts of this heartfelt love to this sex-felt love to this spiritual-felt love, and there were other shades in there. There were other words for it in there. And all we have is love. So if you're talking with somebody who's had sort of that gnosis point regarding love and the grand cosmos, you can go, yeah, man, it was like I was totally included in love, and it was amazing. And if you say that to anybody else, they're going to be like, wow. Yeah, exactly. What's that?
What species of mushroom?
Exactly, yes.
I'll have what she's having.
Exactly, yeah. And so there is this concept of fluff, too. I mentioned fluff. But I would posit that there's dark fluff just as well as there's white fluff. And you've seen it. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. So if anything, with anything, we can take it on a very superficial level. And I'm sure that you know plenty of occultists who are sort of dark fluff, you know? It's all about what's on the surface. It's all about putting on a show of scary darkness. But, you know, they bleed sunshine, and that's cool. Whereas the sparkly, glittery, you know, my wife describes me as Barbie with a heart of darkness. Right? Because you get deeper than that superficial level, you know, and I understand, like, I get that a person, when they don't know me, can write me off. I'm bubbly when I'm happy. And, you know, I look a certain trope, and I get that. But I feel like we all do each other a disservice, and we do these concepts a disservice if we stay right at the surface level. So that's one of the reasons why I'm really glad to be able to dive into these concepts of the darkness and the light, really the archetype of the white witch, the white looking, at least, sorceress that may eat you in the dark, you know, because that's sort of who we're talking about as we get into what I'm going to call Ishtar women, or the devil's brides. So back to the black goddess for just a second. I'm trying to remember what my next slide is. Let's see. Nope, not ready for it yet. Well, we'll leave it there. I'm only going to touch on the black goddess right now, this sort of the other face of the white goddess, really just to pose the contrast. And I'm going to describe her as Lilith Ishtar, or Lilith Sophia, right? She's the lady of wisdom. She's the lady of deep wisdom. She's the first. She's the source. And to the red god, she is a lover. She is a mistress. She is a teacher. She is his sister very often. She shows up as Nama, sister. And very much a lover, very much a mistress. He has that relationship with her, absolutely, 100%. But it's the white goddess that shows up as wife. I'm not necessarily going to suggest that I know what that means or why that's different than mistress and lover, because she does show up as lover, but also as wife. It's Aphrodite married to Hephaestus, the forge god. Yeah, and these also other images, other things that we see. He often comes and claims her. You're mine, and he teaches her. So when we see, for instance, some of the legends of the fall of the angels that Bill was talking about earlier, for instance, and then I'm sure we'll have more conversations about this weekend. The angels take brides, right, from human women. She's the human woman. She's the one who is taught the secrets of sorcery, who is taught the magic, and he becomes to her the man in black, the magister, this great teacher. She's also the whore, very often the whore. The goddesses of love and sexuality are very, very often associated with sacred sexuality and sacred prostitution. And in many cases, too, the legends of the fall indicate that they took prostitutes, at least some of them did, and taught them, for instance, that Azazel taught how to apply kohl to the eyes, you know, this how to work makeup and that kind of thing. And we're actually going to talk a little bit more about that on Sunday. Why kohl? You know, why makeup? Why is this forge smith the one who's teaching beauty tricks, per se? There's a good reason for it, but she's the student who becomes sort of the queen of the witches. You know, she's the first of the human women, and maybe more to the point, she is a human woman who's then propagating this light, this illumination, and that's always been a reviled thing. There's never been a time when the witch was embraced by her community. She always lived on the edges, and the same to a large extent with the whore. She may have been honored, but she wasn't part of us necessarily. She was a separate sort of person, a fringe person, a person to whom you could go to get in touch with the gods, but you didn't bring her into the house. Like, she didn't live with you. You didn't introduce her to mom. So with this white goddess, and I've got here again John's image of the white goddess of Goda, of Ishtar Eve, and actually a depiction of Venus, this very golden goddess. She's very often associated with gold. Part of that's because the ancient Mesopotamian images of Ishtar, Astarte, were often overlaid with gold. They were actually made out of gold. So that's one of the reasons why that's there. I could get into more esoteric reasons for why they picked gold, for why gold was the thing. Gold doesn't rust. It doesn't decay. It doesn't go away. You know, it doesn't tarnish. But it's also very malleable, right? So gold and love is this sort of soft thing, as opposed to the iron of the forge. We have then expressions of, oh yeah, this was actually supposed to be up during the last part. I loved this one. So Ishtar women, the devil's brides. Yeah, I like this particular image because, of course, it's so campy, but also because she's so shiny, you know. That I really like. Yeah. So we've got the succubus. Now, I am also going to say that there is a difference between a black goddess Lilith Sophia type succubus and a white goddess Ishtar Eve succubus. There are lots and lots of succubi. Lots of them. And if you don't know what a succubus is, I'm guessing most of you do, but just in case, the succubus is the figure that seduces you very often in your sleep, very, very often in your sleep, has sex with you. She's a female. Incubus would be the male version. And then proceeds to suck away your life force, your energy. Sometimes this happens over the course of years. Sometimes this happens just in one night. She is a dangerous, dangerous woman or demon. Black goddess succubuses tend to be pretty straightforward. They also tend to have certain tropes that are, you know, related just to them. The white goddess succubuses have a very siren-y look, but they're not quite siren. So they're killing you over a period of time, but they have certain things that they have in common. They've got water in common almost universally. So almost all the white goddess type succubi, are associated with water, and usually fresh water. Rivers, lakes, large ponds, fountains, springs, wells, this idea of fresh water. They're also very, very often shown in a white dress. And for those of you that are into just sort of paranormal mythology as well, we end up with the woman in white ghost. That's very much an extension of this concept. They almost always have long, unbound hair. The hair is a part of the power. They're usually seen combing said hair by a lake or a river. So the hair is a thing, and it's often blonde or red. Not always, but it's very often blonde or red, and really red's more common even than blonde, for this type of being. They've got a spirit wife aspect, so where the black goddess succubus will take your sexual energy, take your life energy, and just leave you dead or dying or mad. The white goddess succubus often wants to be your wife. There's a lot of, not all of them, but there are several where they get ragey and jealous if you bring another woman into the equation. You're theirs, and they're yours. And they'll help you. as long as you understand that you belong to them. They can be helpful, whereas most of the black goddess ones are just there to, eat your soul. The white goddess ones are just, tasty. It's a good snack. The white goddess ones often can be persuaded to help you, to build bridges, to guard your treasures, to help make you pope. I don't know how many of you know this, but Pope Sylvester II confessed before his death that he. Do I have a message? Oh.
That's a pope, right?
The Pope.
Sylvester.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. The second?
The second. Yeah, he confessed to having a relationship with a succubus by the name of Meridiana, who helped him ascend to the papacy. But and then he was absolved and died. So it's all good.
Sylvester.
Yes, Sylvester. The second. So I'm going to try to keep going but get all the things. I mentioned revenge before. They're very, very often bent on revenge or vengeance, particularly on cheating men. Or on just the concept of men, because they were often murdered by their lovers, by their husbands, by their lovers, by their fiancés. These are often spirits that were wronged in the worst way you could be wronged, and then they want to take it out on either all men, specific types of men, or just men in general until they've been avenged. They're also really, really associated with songs and laughter. Their voices are really important. So I'm going to give just a couple of quick examples of some of these that are throughout the world's mythology. We've got the Ruzalka, who's Slavic, and she's sort of a half fish, half serpent woman. Green eyes, her laughter lures you, and then she drowns you in the lake. From the same region, we've got the Samadiva or the Vila, who are also these sort of fish women, half fish women, very mermaidy, right? But they come out at night to dance on the land, and so their dance is the thing that entrances you. They're not necessarily looking to kill you, although they might accidentally set you on fire. Because their magic is very tied up with fire. They're very attracted to fires, and yeah, you might burn up as a result of their loving you so much. The Samadiva or the Vila is willing to take a strand of her hair to bind you to them. So she'll give it to you as a token of love and affection, but it's a gift with a price, right? Now you're hers. It's like a wedding band that she's just slipped around you. You have the Karina in Arabic Egyptian myth, who has that whole sex with you while you're sleeping concept, and she's the one that will hurt you and your very unlucky bride should you choose to get married to somebody who's human and in the flesh, because you're hers. We have the Mohini in India, and there are actually two different types of Mohini. So the one that we're talking about is, again, a woman with long, unbound hair, a white sari. She's always shown in the white sari. She died at the hands of her lover, and she wants to be avenged, but she'll keep tricking men into coming and being drowned in her lake or her river, the place where she drowned, until somebody takes up her cause. We have Kleena, who's Irish, and that's not at all what her name is spelled like. It's a weird Irish spelling. So Kleena had been very much a goddess of love and beauty. She's associated with apples and colorful birds and singing, healing songs particularly, so we can see like this really direct translation of the goddess of love. Until she died on her way to get married. She drowned on her sea voyage, and she became the queen of the banshees. She's actually the one who is, and so now we have the voice acting in a very distinctly negative way. It's the harbinger of death, and it strikes fear, as opposed to being a healing thing. The Leanne and She, another one from the Irish, and this lovely redheaded lady right here is said to be one of the Leanne. It's a depiction of the Leanne and she. Leanne and she means fairy lover, and she's another one that helps you. She'll basically take an artist or a poet, a musician, into her protection and feed them wonderful inspiration and slowly drive them mad, as happens with artists and musicians and poets. Yeah. There's the Lamia, and this is not to be confused with the Greek Lamia, but this is a Basque Lamia, who is entirely helpful, is not trying to kill you at all. But she's another spirit lover. She's associated with rivers, combing her long golden hair. She charms men. She's said to sit at the end of the rainbow. She helps build bridges and this type of thing, but she's got duck feet. So, and she's actually, if you look at some of the mythology related to white goddesses throughout that part of Europe, you have the duck-footed goddess, or the duck-footed queen, La Reine Pédique, the one, Mother Goose. She ends up being Mother Goose for us a lot. Hulda, Frau Halle, who is a very white goddessy figure. And it's interesting, actually, with the name Hulda, there's a similar spirit called the Huldra, who actually isn't on my list, but should be. And she's a forest wife. She lures you into the forest to live with her, and presumably if you try to leave, that's when she offs you. And on and on and on, right? There are lots of them, and they're often singing or dancing, combing their long, beautiful hair, either with a golden comb or the hair is golden, usually, one of these two. So we get that symbolism of gold again, which actually relates really closely to, then, the siren. Who's a figure that I'm sure that you know from Greek myth, but I don't know if you're aware how much she plays out in other types of mythology. Obviously, these succubi figures that I've just mentioned are all very siren-esque. Siren's trying to kill you. That's the sort of most major difference. You know, either she cares nothing at all for you, or she's actively trying to kill you. And she's perhaps the most seductive of all of them. My favorite siren. Oh, actually, before I say that, she's always trying to kill people by water. She's trying to drown man in water, and I like the symbolism too, in the sense that elemental water it's the great womb, it's the great chalice. So she's very, very literally trying to kill you with sex. She drags you down to the depths where you drown in love, drown in sex. I love it. My very favorite siren, does anyone want to venture a guess? The Lorelei. The Lorelei.
A song by Theater of Tragedy, Lorelei. Might like it.
I love all the songs named Lorelei. And there are several of them. Yeah, and in fact, so Lorelei's not my given name, but I found out years after I had taken it, at first as a dance name. I'm a belly dancer, and I wanted something other than Laura, because that just doesn't sound mysterious to me. So I chose Lorelei because it was the first nickname I'd ever been given when I was living in Germany as a very small child. One of my dad's army buddies' wives called me Lorelei. And again, in college, I had a friend who, she and I were really into Marilyn Monroe and the Marilyn Monroe movies. And of course, the famous character from Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is Lorelei Lee. So I took the name Lorelei, and I found out about 3 years into using this name really regularly, and it's starting to become a persona for me online and presenting. My dad looked at me and said, "You know, that's what I wanted to name you." And my mother vetoed it. She didn't want me named Lorelei. So in a lot of senses, Lorelei is my name, you know. And I'd like to share with you, a poem, if I might, just to sort of illustrate the power of the Lorelei, of the siren. I am the flood that drowned men, the sea that swallows and soothes. From my cup, honey is poured onto the stone, and wine and brine and all the ocean is come unto you, my love, my lover. I am the raging storm, the tempest that rocks the bark and whips the sails and seamen to frenzy, before lulling all into watery dreams of me. The end. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about Lorelei and about Siren. I'm going to hit really quickly because I know that we're wanting to take a break for lunch, so I'm trying to speed this up a little more than I would have, and I can talk. I'm really passionate about this particular topic, about the white goddess in general, you know, about this lady of love, and it's exciting to me to be able to talk about sort of the dark aspects of this lady of love. So I'm going to talk about mythic and historic seductresses, specifically those pulled from biblical references and Greek myth. So I'm going to rush through them. We've got Helen of Troy, Helen of Sparta, who, according to the Iliad, is very distinctly picked out by the goddess of love, by Aphrodite, and is told, you know, it's not so much that she's choosing Paris for herself. She's told, you belong to me. You're going to go have sex with this man and go back to the city that I protect and that I honor and where they love me over there. And you're going to be his, because I said so. And at some points, Helen actually protests. She's like, he's whiny, and he can't fight. She likes Menelaus. And why wouldn't she? Because the goddess of love really likes the god of war. The goddess of love was the goddess of war for a really long time, so she thinks he's pretty hot. Paris is whiny and complaining, and a coward a little bit. He keeps trying to get away from standing up and doing the thing that he said he was going to do. And Aphrodite basically smacks her around and says, I said you're mine. Do what I said. So we've got Helen. We've got Jezebel, the Phoenician priestess princess, who was a priestess of Baal and Asherah, or Baal and Astarte. We've got Delilah, who again is associated with sex and long hair, although in this case not her own, but there's this long hair as power, and sacrifice. And we've got, this is actually a picture of Salome. And so we've got Salome and Herodias, her mother, who are very much the temptresses and seductresses, again with the dancing and again with the sacrifice, the beheading of John the Baptist as part of the price that Salome requires, that her mother requires. And Medea. Medea, who helps Jason all along the way, helps him defeat everybody, including killing her own kith and kin, uses youth spells to keep herself young and beautiful, and when she's betrayed in love, kills everybody. Just everybody. Her own children, anybody that she's associated with Jason, they're not safe. Which brings us, you know, we've gotten into the human, we get, sorry, an image from Witches of Eastwick. We get witches, we get us, we get the very real, flesh and blood and bone, very, very dangerous women of magic and love and sex. And yeah, this is Jack Nicholson as the devil. With his coven of witches, with his 3 witches, and the stories that we get of witches, of these devil's brides, and their god and their magister, you know, the man who teaches them the witchcraft, are almost invariably very, very sexual. We get Aradia, who's the queen of the witches, who is the daughter then of Lucifer and Diana. So we have the queen of the witches being taught very directly by her father, by Lucifer. Aradia is related etymologically to Herodias, who I mentioned with Salome, and also to Ariadne of the silver thread in the labyrinth, and to Arianrhod, the silver wheel, who's also connected with sex and betrayal, although the betrayal is against her. So some of the images that come up a lot with the concept of witches particularly are silver wheels and labyrinths, and again, sometimes that hair being the thread that connects. So the big themes here, I think, that are implications for magical practice, or at least for mythic study, are beauty can be a very distinct tool or weapon, and I know that we know that. But in terms of a magical sense, beauty or the illusion thereof is potent. Long hair. I don't even know if I can say it enough. I don't know why it shows up that much. I don't think that we fully understand that. But I know that there have been some studies about hair and just sort of the concept of prana and life force. And there have been studies that have shown that when you cut the hair, very often you're cutting off part of your own personal power. You get more disconnected. I know, it's a shame. He's like, oh no. Now my man, if his hair gets long, he gets weaker. That's how he. So he does the whole shave thing, and he claims that the more hair he has, the weaker he gets. So we keep him shorn. But especially for women, maybe this long hair, this sense of power. It is definitely a very, especially in many cultures, this idea of the long unbent hair is a very feminine trait, which then holds a lot of power, and it's directly related to sex and sexuality. We also have the enchantment, this chant, this voice, this song. You know, beware the song of the Lorelei, beware the song of the siren. It might not end well for you. And we also have dancing as seduction, and dancing as power over others, raising power within yourself, and ultimately I think dancing is a metaphor for the sex act itself. So I think that that's one of the reasons why it shows up so often. And the white dress, the white clothing, because some of these most dangerous spirits are not necessarily hiding in the shadows, they're glowing and ready to have you follow them off to fairyland, where you will never be seen again. So I think in the interest of wrapping up and having some lunch, I'm going to end there. I would love to talk with anybody more about this that would like to. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I had so many speakers, I didn't schedule a lunch, so I was wondering. They have a buffet lunch right outside the door, and if you want to move the schedule up, half hour, 45 minutes, so that we